My mom said, "If you can't afford the trip, stay home." Then I saw my card charge 4 first-class tickets I never booked, hit dispute all, locked the account, and smiled when my dad knocked on my door. I found out my family was taking a vacation without me because my mother had apparently decided I was too broke to go. The funny part was that I was sitting at my kitchen table looking at 4 first-class airline charges on my credit card while she was telling me I could stay home. I had not booked the tickets. I had not authorized anyone else to use my card. And until that moment, I had honestly believed the biggest problem I had with my parents was that they still thought of me as the irresponsible kid who needed financial advice. I was 32, had a full-time job, owned my house, paid my mortgage every month, and had been using the same credit card for years without carrying a balance. I was not rich. I was not struggling either. I had around 6 months of living expenses in savings, a retirement account through work, and a credit score that I had spent most of my 20s carefully rebuilding after making some dumb decisions right after college. My parents knew all of this because, unfortunately, I had been too open with them about money. That became important later. At the time, I thought family members knowing your financial situation was just part of being close. I did not understand that some people hear a number and immediately start mentally assigning it to themselves. The trip came up at my parents' house during a Sunday dinner. My mom had been talking about taking a long vacation for months. My dad had recently retired and my younger sister had gotten engaged. The original plan was supposed to be a family trip. At least that was how I understood it. My sister and her fiancé were going. My parents were going. I was supposed to go too. Nobody had given me a specific date at first, so I kept saying I needed to check my vacation time at work. I eventually found out the trip was going to cost me somewhere around $3,000 once flights, hotel, food, and transportation were included. That was a lot of money, but it was not impossible for me. I told my parents I could make it work if I booked everything a few months in advance. My mom seemed irritated by that answer. She acted like I was making the trip complicated. I remember feeling embarrassed because my sister was sitting there talking about restaurants she wanted to try and activities she had found online. I was the only person discussing budgets. My dad mostly stayed quiet. My mom eventually told me that if I could not afford the trip, I should just stay home. She said it in a way that made it sound like she was doing me a favor. I laughed awkwardly because I did not want to start an argument at dinner. I told her I could afford it. She shrugged. I did not think much more about it. The following week, I noticed my mom had sent me several links related to the trip. Hotels, restaurants, flight schedules, nothing unusual. I assumed she was trying to coordinate everyone. Then my sister started a group text without me. I did not know about it until she accidentally forwarded me a screenshot of something about dinner reservations. She apologized and said she had added me by mistake. That was the first moment I felt like something was off. I asked whether the plans had changed. My sister said they had mostly finalized things. I asked whether I was still included. She took several hours to respond. Eventually, she said my mom had told her I was not coming because I had said the trip was too expensive. That was not what I had said. I had said I needed to budget for it. Those are very different things. I called my mom. She acted surprised that I cared. She said she thought I had decided not to go. I reminded her that I had told her I could afford it. She said I had seemed hesitant. I told her hesitation was not the same as declining. She said she did not want me stressing about money while everyone else was trying to enjoy themselves. That irritated me more than I expected. I told her I was an adult and could decide whether I wanted to spend my own money. She became defensive. She said she was only trying to help. The conversation ended with me feeling like I had somehow become the unreasonable one. I decided not to fight about it. I figured I would let them go without me. I could take my own trip later. I even started looking at weekend destinations because I did not want to spend my vacation time sitting around feeling sorry for myself. Then, about 2 weeks before they were supposed to leave, I got an alert from my credit card company. It was one of those notifications I normally ignored because I had them turned on for every purchase. The alert said there was a large travel purchase pending. The amount was just over $11,000. I stared at it for a few seconds because I initially assumed it was some kind of mistake. I opened the credit card app. The merchant was an airline. The charge was still pending. I checked the card number. It was my primary credit card. I checked the last 4 digits. They matched. I immediately wondered whether I had somehow booked something and forgotten. That sounds ridiculous, but I actually opened my email and searched for flight confirmations. There was nothing. I checked my calendar. Nothing. I checked my bank account because maybe someone had used a different payment method and the credit card charge was only a deposit. Nothing. Then I opened the transaction details. There were 4 first-class tickets, Same airline, same departure date, same destination, 4 passengers. The amount was $11,842.16. I sat there staring at the screen. The first thought I had was that my card information had been stolen. The second thought was that maybe my sister had somehow used my card. The third thought was my mother. I did not want that third thought. I actually pushed it away. My mom knew the card number because I had used it to pay for family expenses before. A few years earlier, she had helped me book a hotel for my grandfather's funeral. I had read the card number to her over the phone. She could also have had the number saved somewhere. But I did not want to accuse her without knowing. I called the credit card company. The representative asked whether I recognized the transaction. I said no. She asked whether I still had the physical card. I looked at it sitting on the counter. I said yes. She explained that the physical card being in my possession did not rule out someone having the card information. She asked whether anyone else had permission to use the account. I said no. She walked me through the fraud process. I disputed the transaction. Then I saw that there were 3 other pending charges from the same airline. The total was actually 4 separate tickets. I disputed all 4. I locked the account through the app. Then I called the card company again because I wanted to make sure the disputes were attached to the account. The representative confirmed that the charges were being investigated and that the card number would be replaced. I asked whether the airline could tell me who had booked the tickets. She said they could not provide that information to me directly, but the bank could request transaction details during the investigation. That made me feel slightly better. I went into my account and downloaded the recent transaction history. I also took screenshots of everything. I saved the emails. I saved the dispute confirmation. I wrote down the time I reported the fraud. I did not know whether any of this would matter. I just knew I did not want to rely on my memory later. That was something I had learned from work. When something strange happens, document it before you start arguing about it. I went to bed that night feeling sick. The next morning, I received a text from my mom asking whether I had changed my mind about the trip. I stared at the message for a long time. I did not answer immediately. I was trying to decide whether she actually knew about the tickets. Maybe my sister had booked them. Maybe someone else had used the card. Maybe the timing was a coincidence. I eventually replied that I was not going on the trip. My mom responded that she understood. That was it. No mention of money. No mention of tickets. Nothing. That bothered me. If she really believed I was staying home because I could not afford it, why had she just asked whether I had changed my mind? I spent the next few days trying not to obsess over it. Then I received another alert. The 4 airline charges had moved from pending to posted. The disputes were still active. The bank had already issued a temporary credit for the disputed amount. I called again and asked whether there was anything else I should do. The representative recommended changing passwords on any account where the card information might have been stored and watching for additional unauthorized activity. I did exactly that. I changed my email password. I changed my banking password. I checked my credit report. I froze my credit temporarily. I checked my other cards. Nothing else looked suspicious. Then something happened that changed how I viewed the whole situation. My dad called me. He sounded nervous. He asked whether I had gotten the new credit card yet. I said no. He said he thought I had already taken care of it. I asked what he meant. He hesitated. Then he asked whether the airline had canceled the tickets. I felt my stomach drop. I asked him how he knew there were tickets. He went quiet. He said my mom had handled the booking. I asked him what he meant by that. He said she had told him I was paying for the flights. I told him I was not. There was another long silence. My dad said he thought I had agreed to cover the airfare because I was not paying for the hotel. That made absolutely no sense to me. I asked him why he thought I had agreed to pay for 4 first-class tickets. He said he did not know. He said my mom had told him I had offered. I told him I had never offered anything like that. He sounded genuinely confused. Then he asked me whether I had disputed the charges. I said yes. He asked whether the bank had reversed them. I said the bank had temporarily credited my account while investigating. He did not respond for several seconds. Then he said my mom was going to be furious. That was the first time I understood that this might not have been simple fraud. I asked my dad whether he knew who the 4 passengers were. He said he assumed it was him, my mom, my sister, and her fiancé. I asked whether they had already received the tickets. He said yes. That was the moment I felt cold all over. They had not just used my card number. They had booked a family vacation on my credit account without asking me. And apparently they had discussed it among themselves enough that everyone expected the trip to happen. I asked my dad whether he had seen the price. He said my mom told him the tickets were expensive, but that I had insisted on first class. I actually laughed, not because it was funny. It was the kind of laugh you make when something is so absurd that your brain cannot process it normally. I had never flown first class in my life. I had never even suggested it. My dad said he would talk to my mom. I told him not to tell her anything yet. I wanted to know exactly what had happened before anyone started changing their story. He agreed. I spent that afternoon going through everything I had. There was no written authorization, no text from me approving the purchase, no email, no bank transfer, nothing. Then I remembered something from months earlier. My mom had asked me whether she could use my card to reserve a rental car for a family event. I had said yes. It was a small amount. She paid me back. I had not thought twice about it. I wondered whether she had saved the card information from that transaction. I called the rental company and asked whether they stored card details. They said they did, but the card would not be visible to them as a full number. That did not prove anything. I started wondering whether my card information had been stolen somewhere else. The bank's fraud department eventually called me. They told me the airline transaction was unusual because the purchase had been made through an online travel booking channel rather than at an airport or physical ticket counter. They asked whether I had authorized the purchase. I said no. They asked whether I knew the passengers. I said I knew them, but I had not authorized their tickets. They asked whether I had ever given my mother permission to use the card. I told them about the rental car. They asked when that happened. I gave them the approximate date. They explained that prior permission for one transaction did not automatically authorize future purchases. That was obvious to me, but hearing a bank employee say it made me feel less crazy. The investigator told me to continue documenting everything. I did. I created a folder on my computer. I saved the dispute paperwork. I saved the screenshots. I saved the emails. I saved the credit report. I saved every text message related to the trip. I also wrote down the timeline while everything was fresh. I did not tell my parents that I was doing this. At that point, I was no longer trying to prove that I was right. I was trying to protect myself. 2 days later, my mom called. She was angry. She said the airline had notified them that the tickets were not valid. I asked why she thought they were valid in the first place. She said she had made arrangements with me. I told her that was not true. She said I had agreed to pay for the flights. I asked her when I supposedly agreed. She could not give me a date. She said we had discussed it. I asked where. She said at dinner. I knew exactly which dinner she meant. I remembered that conversation because she had told me to stay home if I could not afford the trip. I told her that was not an agreement to pay for anything. She became increasingly upset. She said she had already spent money on the hotel. I asked why she had booked a hotel if she was not sure I was paying. She said because she thought I was coming. I reminded her that she had told me I was not part of the trip. She said she had only said that because I was complaining about the cost. I told her I had never complained. I had said I needed to budget. She said I was twisting her words. That was the point where I stopped trying to convince her. I told her I had disputed the charges because I had not authorized them. She said I had embarrassed the family. I told her I had not done anything to the family. I had protected my credit card. She said the bank would see that I knew the passengers and reject the dispute. I told her that was between me and the bank. She said she expected me to call the airline and fix it. I told her I would not. That made her even angrier. The call ended badly. I sat in my kitchen afterward and felt guilty. That surprised me. I knew I had done the right thing. I also knew my parents were angry. Both things could be true. I called my dad that night. He sounded exhausted. He told me my mom had believed the tickets were already paid for. I asked him whether she had shown him anything proving I agreed. He said no. I asked whether she had told him the card belonged to me. He said yes. I asked whether he had ever seen me authorize the purchase. He said no. I asked him whether he knew the amount. He said my mom had told him it was around $12,000. I asked why he thought I would spend that much. He said he did not know. Then he admitted something else. My mom had been telling relatives that I was paying for the family trip because I owed everyone after getting help from my parents years earlier. That was the first thing that really hurt. I knew exactly what she meant. When I was 24, I had been laid off. My parents helped me with 2 months of rent. I paid them back. It took me almost a year. There was never an agreement that I owed them a vacation. There was never an agreement that I owed them anything beyond what they had loaned me. But apparently my mother had been carrying around a different version of that story. In her version, they had sacrificed for me. Therefore, when I was financially stable, I was supposed to return the favor whenever she decided. I asked my dad why nobody had ever told me this. He said he did not think my mom expected me to pay for everything. He said she probably thought I would just handle the flights. I reminded him that 4 first-class tickets cost more than some people's annual rent. He agreed. Then he said something that stuck with me. He said my mom had been telling people that I had plenty of money. I realized then that I had created part of the problem. I had talked too much about my finances. I had mentioned getting a raise. I had mentioned refinancing my mortgage. I had mentioned contributing more to my retirement account. I had even complained once about how much money I was leaving in my checking account because I was saving for a kitchen renovation. I had assumed those were harmless conversations. My family apparently heard them as proof that I could absorb whatever expense they wanted. The next morning, I contacted the airline directly. They would not discuss the passenger details because I was not the traveler. They did confirm that the disputed tickets had been purchased with my card information. They also confirmed that the booking had been made online. The representative would not tell me the name of the person who made the booking. That was fine. I did not need it. The bank already had enough information to investigate. A few days later, the fraud investigator called again. She told me the merchant had provided additional documentation. The transaction had been made from a device that had not previously been associated with my account. The billing information matched my name. The traveler's information did not. She said the bank was continuing the investigation. I asked whether I needed to provide anything else. She said no. That was when I started to relax. Then my sister called. She was crying. She said she had no idea my mom had used my card without permission. I asked her whether she had known I was not paying for the trip. She said she thought my parents were covering it. I asked why she thought that. She said my mom had told her I was giving the family the airfare as a gift. I felt like I had been punched. I asked whether my sister had ever thanked me for the tickets. She said yes. That was the first time I realized how far this had gone. My sister had actually believed I was paying for the trip. She had apparently been telling her fiancé that I was doing something generous for the family. I asked her whether she had ever asked me. She said she assumed my mom had already talked to me. I told her my mom had told me to stay home because I could not afford the trip. My sister started crying harder. She said she felt terrible. I told her I was not angry with her. That was true. I was angry at the situation. She said she had already paid for her wedding dress alterations and was worried about losing the money she had spent planning around the trip. I told her I understood. Then she admitted she had seen the flight confirmation before I knew about the charges. She had assumed everything was fine. I asked her who had sent it. She said my mom. That mattered because it meant my mom had been directly communicating the itinerary to the travelers. Again, it did not prove who had entered the card information, but it showed that the trip was planned deliberately. This was not someone accidentally using the wrong card. The 4 tickets were intentional. My dad came to my house that weekend. He did not usually visit without calling first. I was standing in my driveway when he pulled up. He looked tired. He told me he wanted to talk without my mom there. We went inside. He apologized. I did not know what to say. He told me he had been embarrassed by the whole situation. He said he had trusted my mom's explanation. He also admitted that he had noticed something strange before the tickets were booked. My mom had asked him for my new card number because she said the old one had expired. My dad had assumed I had given it to her. I had not. I asked him when she asked. He gave me a date. It was about a week before the airline charge. That date was important. I checked my old messages. I had received a replacement card from the credit card company around that time because my previous card had expired. I had not activated the new one yet. That meant my mother could not have gotten the new number from an old receipt. She had somehow obtained the replacement information. I asked my dad whether he had seen her write anything down. He said no. He said she had been sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop. That was all he knew. I did not accuse my mom. I did not need to. The bank investigation would deal with the transaction. My dad asked whether I would consider dropping the dispute if my mom paid me back. I told him that was not how I wanted to handle it. He asked why. I explained that if I withdrew the fraud claim simply because a family member promised to repay me, I would still be left with the problem of someone using my card without authorization. I told him I needed the official record to be accurate. He nodded. He looked disappointed, but he understood. Then he asked whether I wanted him to pay me. I told him no. I did not want his money. I wanted my account protected. That seemed to change something in him. He said he had spent his whole marriage trying to keep the peace. He said sometimes keeping the peace meant pretending things were not happening. He admitted that he had probably enabled my mom. I told him I did not want him to take sides. I just wanted everyone to stop pretending this had been a misunderstanding. He said he would try. A week later, the bank finished the investigation. They permanently removed the charges from my account. The temporary credit became permanent. They issued me a new card number. They also told me the merchant had not provided evidence that I had authorized the transaction. That was the end of the financial part from the bank's perspective. For me, it was not the end. My mother still owed an explanation. She came to my house with my dad a few days later. I almost did not let them in. I eventually did because I wanted the conversation over with. My mom looked angry rather than ashamed. She said the whole thing had gotten out of control. She said she never intended for the situation to become this serious. I asked her what she thought would happen when I saw 4 first-class tickets charged to my card. She said she thought I would understand. I asked her what exactly I was supposed to understand. She said she believed I had agreed to help pay for the trip. I asked her whether she had my permission to use the card. She said she had permission in the past. I reminded her that permission to use a card for a rental car did not mean permission to buy 4 plane tickets. She said I was being technical. That word stayed with me, technical, as if financial authorization was a technicality. She then said she had intended to tell me. I asked when. She said before the trip. I asked what she would have told me. She said she would have explained that the family needed the tickets and that I could afford them. I asked whether she expected me to agree after the purchase had already been made. She did not answer. My dad finally interrupted and said that was the problem. My mom became angry with him too. She said everyone was acting like she had committed some terrible crime. I told her I was not calling her a criminal. I was saying she used my financial information without my permission. She said she was my mother. I said that did not change the rules. That was probably the hardest thing I had ever said to her, not because it was complicated, because I had spent my whole life believing that being someone's son meant tolerating things I would never tolerate from anyone else. My mom started crying. For a second, I almost backed down. Then I remembered the 4 first-class tickets. I remembered her telling me I could stay home. I remembered my sister thanking me for a gift I had never agreed to give. I remembered my dad asking whether the bank had reversed the charges, and I realized that feeling guilty did not mean I was wrong. My mom eventually admitted that she had used the card. She said she had believed I would never actually refuse if the family needed something. She said she thought I was being selfish. She said my sister deserved a nice trip after everything she had been through planning her wedding. I told her I understood wanting to give my sister something nice. I did not understand deciding that I would pay for it without asking. She said she had planned to reimburse me. I asked where the money was coming from. She said they would figure it out later. That answer told me everything I needed to know. There was no reimbursement plan. There had been an assumption. My mother had assumed my money was available because I was her son. That was the actual conflict. The vacation was just the thing that exposed it. After they left, I sat on my couch for almost an hour. I was angry, I was sad. Mostly I was disappointed in myself. I kept thinking about all the times I had told my family things I did not need to tell them. My salary, my savings goals, my mortgage balance, my retirement contributions, the amount I spent fixing my car. I had treated transparency like trust. I had not realized that boundaries are part of trust too. The trip itself eventually became a family disaster. My sister and her fiancé canceled their plans. The hotel refunded some of their reservations but kept a cancellation fee. My parents lost money on a few prepaid activities. My mom blamed me for that. I did not accept the blame. I told her that if she had asked me before booking anything, none of it would have happened. She said she had thought I would come around. That sentence bothered me more than almost anything else. She had not misunderstood me. She had decided my answer was temporary. My sister eventually apologized to me in person. She said she had believed I was trying to make the trip special for everyone. I told her I wished she had asked me. She said she should have. Our relationship was awkward for a while. I did not want to punish her for something she had not done, but I also did not want to pretend nothing had happened. We started talking again slowly. She invited me to dinner with her fiancé. I went. We talked about normal things, work, wedding planning, groceries, a broken dishwasher. It felt strangely good to have an ordinary conversation. My dad also changed. He started checking with me directly whenever money was involved. If my mom said I had agreed to something, he would ask me himself. At first, that felt uncomfortable. Eventually, I appreciated it. My parents also stopped asking me how much money I had saved. I stopped telling them. I changed the passwords on my financial accounts. I enabled 2-factor authentication everywhere. I removed saved payment information from family devices. I stopped giving out card numbers over the phone. I created separate cards for different purposes. I also started keeping better records, not because I expected another family dispute, because I had learned that memory becomes surprisingly unreliable when people disagree about what happened. A few months later, I received a letter from the credit card company confirming the fraud investigation was closed. I kept it. I probably did not need to, but I kept it. The airline never pursued me for the tickets because the bank had handled the dispute. My credit report remained clean. There was no lawsuit, no police drama, no courtroom scene, nothing cinematic happened that actually made the whole thing feel more real. The consequences were mostly awkward conversations, lost money, damaged trust, and relationships that had to be rebuilt. My mom and I did not speak for several months. Eventually, she sent me a long message. She apologized for using the card. She also apologized for telling people I was paying for the trip. She said she had convinced herself that I would eventually agree because I had always helped the family when I could. She admitted that she had stopped seeing the difference between me being willing to help and me being obligated to help. That distinction probably saved our relationship. I accepted the apology. I did not immediately go back to normal. I told her I needed boundaries going forward. She said she understood. I hoped she did. There was one final thing that happened that I still think about. Almost a year after the incident, my sister got married. The wedding was much smaller than originally planned. I gave her a gift. It was nowhere near $11,000. It was something practical that she and her husband could actually use. I also gave a short speech. I did not mention the trip. I did not mention the credit card. I did not embarrass my mother. That was important to me. I did not want revenge. I wanted the family to move forward. My dad hugged me afterward. My mom thanked me for coming. Things were not magically fixed, but they were different. My mom stopped treating my financial independence like a family resource. My dad became more willing to challenge assumptions. My sister became much more direct with me, and I became much less afraid of saying no. That last part probably mattered most. Before all of this, I thought saying no to family was something you did only when you had a really good reason. Afterward, I realized no is already a complete reason when the thing being requested belongs to you. I also stopped thinking of documentation as something only lawyers and businesses needed. I keep records because facts are easier to deal with than competing memories. I keep financial alerts turned on. I check my accounts. I do not share passwords. I do not leave payment information saved on someone else's device. And when someone tells me I am selfish for protecting my own money, I do not automatically assume I have done something wrong. The strangest part is that I never actually had to prove my mother was lying. I did not need to catch her in some elaborate scheme. I did not need a secret recording. I did not need a dramatic confrontation in front of the entire family. I disputed charges I did not authorize. I locked the account. I documented what happened. I answered the bank's questions honestly. I let the investigation follow the evidence. That was enough. The facts did the rest. My mother had spent weeks telling everyone I could afford the trip. I never had to argue about whether I could afford it. The real question was whether I had agreed to pay for it. I had not. And once the bank looked at the transaction, the answer became pretty simple. I still think about the night I saw those 4 first-class tickets. For a few minutes, I wondered whether I had somehow forgotten something. I wondered whether I was being unreasonable. I wondered whether I should just pay the bill and avoid a family fight. That instinct is probably why the situation happened in the first place. I was used to keeping things peaceful, but there is a difference between keeping peace and purchasing peace. The first can be healthy, the second gets expensive. In my case, it would have cost $11,842. 16. I am glad I did not pay it. I am also glad I did not turn it into something bigger than it needed to be. I did not threaten my mother. I did not post about her online. I did not call every relative and tell them my side. I did not try to ruin the wedding. I did not demand that my dad divorce her or take my side. I simply refused to accept responsibility for something I did not authorize. And when my dad knocked on my door after the charges were disputed, I realized something I probably should have understood years earlier. Being calm does not mean being passive. Being patient does not mean letting people cross your boundaries. And being family does not give someone permission to spend your money. The family trip never happened. The 4 first-class seats were canceled. My account was secured. The money was restored. The relationships took longer. Some of them never went completely back to what they were before, but my life got quieter. I stopped worrying about what surprise expense might appear next. I stopped feeling like I had to prove I was generous. I stopped explaining every financial decision I made. And honestly, that was probably the best outcome I could have gotten, because the thing I originally thought I had lost was a vacation with my family. What I actually gained was the ability to trust myself when something felt wrong. I wish I had learned that lesson without the $11,842. 16 surprise, but I learned it. And the next time someone tells me that if I cannot afford something I should stay home, I will make sure they are not using my card to go without me.